I read Bobby Morris's book, so you don't have to. Bobby Morris was the orchestra conductor at the International Hotel for Elvis Presley from 1969 to early 1970. Now his book, which isn't very long, has very, very little to do with Elvis and much more to do with his time in Las Vegas as a drummer for the likes of Frank Sinatra, Louis Prima, and Bobby Darin. And even though the Elvis portion of the book is only 2 chapters long, I have to say it's one of the least accurate Elvis books that I have ever read. So Bobby Morris's story starts out by being just kind of a legend around Las Vegas. Everybody knows who he is. He's just, you know, kind of the band leader guy. The International Hotel comes around, the biggest hotel in Las Vegas history, and he is asked to be the band leader for the lounge. Now this lounge seated about 600 people, much bigger than most Vegas lounges, and saw some pretty big acts in its day. B.B. King, for example.
B.B. King.
But didn't host artists as large as Elvis, who were in the Showroom International. So orchestra legend Harry James was asked to be the conductor for the Grand Showroom. A couple months before opening the hotel, Harry James backed out without reasoning, and Bobby Morris was asked to fill in for the position. When this happened, Bobby Morris had a meeting with Colonel Parker, who asked him to be Elvis's personal music conductor. So Bobby was brought to the Elvis wing at RCA Victor. He walks through this hallway full of Elvis's gold records, plaques, and eventually winds up in the boardroom with about 30 seats at the table, and Colonel Parker insists that he sit at the head of the table. So after a while, Elvis comes in with his entourage wearing a black designer suit and white tie. So Elvis comes in, they all have lunch, and Colonel introduces Bobby to the board as the personal music conductor for Elvis Presley. Bobby says that him and Elvis got along right away, and they talked over lunch, and there's absolutely no details or context of what at all they talked about. I also left out that Colonel Parker offered for Bobby Morris to move into Elvis's Hollywood house for the rehearsals to go over material and help pick songs for the upcoming engagement. Me personally, I think that Bobby is majorly overplaying the significance of the role that he had in Elvis Presley's show. Now, Bobby described going through the crowds at the gate as going through a car wash full of girls when driving up to the house. Now, ironically, this is probably the biggest lie in the entire book. Bobby Morris claims that he had heard the song Suspicious Minds, gave it to Tom Diskin, and Tom Diskin gave it to RCA for Elvis to record. Elvis recorded Suspicious Minds on January 22nd of 1969. This is all happening in the summer. Elvis hadn't even signed the contract for the International Hotel until February, so this is just a complete lie. Bobby Morris had nothing to do with giving Elvis Suspicious Minds. Then Bobby digs into a bunch of Barbra Streisand stories because Barbra Streisand opened up the hotel before Elvis. Interesting little anecdote, Barbra Streisand couldn't fill the room at first, and they had to curtain off half the room because she was not filling this massive showroom, which Elvis filled every single show for his entire life. Bobby doesn't say much about opening night, just kind of, you know, Elvis was magnificent, okay. Nothing super insightful, but of course there's really nothing insightful in this book. Bobby says that Elvis gave him a watch engraved with From Squirrely EP, as of course he was making lots of squirrel jokes at the time.
Hey squirrel, nice shoes.
This watch sold at an auction a couple years ago after Bobby died. I'll put some pictures of it up. So here's where a couple more factual inaccuracies come in. Bobby Morris claims that after Elvis would leave the stage in 1969, they would play the closing vamp and Al DeVorn would come on and say, "Elvis has left the building." That wasn't happening at the time. Elvis Has Left the Building started in the 50s. You could hear it in the 1961 concert. But I don't think they were using it in Vegas at this time period. But Donald Trump said when he gave Elvis the Presidential Medal of Freedom a couple years ago that when he saw Elvis in Vegas, they did say Elvis has left the house. Obviously, that's also a mistake. The quote is Elvis has left the building. But I doubt they were using it in 1969 because Elvis wasn't leaving the building. He was just going upstairs to his suite. He also mentions that Elvis was giving out scarves. Elvis was not giving out any scarves in 1969. He wasn't giving them out in 1970 either. The scarf routine kind of started by giving out a single scarf at the end of the show in September of 1970. They weren't being given out in Las Vegas yet. Bobby tells one story about Elvis's sense of humor ordering a huge birthday cake for Joe Esposito, made by the master chefs at the International Hotel, a cake that was easily 4 by 4 feet. Right after singing Happy Birthday, Elvis pushed Joe's face into the cake and ruined the cake for everybody, and everybody's mouths are watering looking at this beautiful cake, and no, Elvis just wanted to push Joe's face into the cake. He also tells a story about going into Elvis's dressing room one time. Elvis is sitting there reading a newspaper, and Bobby compliments Elvis's ring that he's wearing. Elvis, in normal Elvis fashion, slips it off his finger and hands it to him. That ring also sold at auction a couple years ago. Here are the pictures. Now, the only story that I found really interesting in this entire book is one routine that I've never heard of Elvis doing in 1969. Apparently, during one of the nights, Elvis dropped his microphone on the ground, and rather than just picking it up, Elvis decided to lay on the floor and sing and go down to the microphone rather than bring the microphone up to him on his back, head facing the audience and singing upside down. He also makes a mistake of saying that the TCB band had been with Elvis for quite some time. He specifically says this, that Ronnie and him knew each other very well and had worked together for some time. Obviously, that's not true. Ronnie was probably cast right around the same time that Bobby was. And that's just one of many factual inaccuracies that are in this book. Basically, all the things that are said about Elvis in this book are either made up or just really poorly remembered. So I definitely don't recommend this book. I don't say that very often about Elvis books, but this thing, I mean, the book was like $30, but I told you every single thing that you would possibly want to know from this book, and most of it's not right anyways. But yeah, I read it, so you don't have to. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. God bless y'all. Thank you.